Welcome to the Just Regular Guys podcast,
where we give our non-expert opinions on the things that matter.
Okay, so we're back. Episode 5. I'm pretty excited about this one. Obviously, first things first, this is our first time actually filming the podcast with video, which I'm excited about. But also, I think both of us it could probably a little bit of nerves about that. So if you catch any of us acting awkward, don't judge.
Well, I like to, in our past ones, I've been sitting like this,
right.
So now I feel like I'm gonna be
right.
I'm trying to sit up straight.
Yeah. The regular guys thing still applies to. We're not professional actors or podcasters, so
or models.
Yeah, or models. Yeah. But anyways, I think we got a lot to talk about in this episode. The main overarching subject is kind of the first 2 weeks of Trump's presidency. So it's pretty
Trump
much
2.0.
Yeah, it's pretty much 2 weeks on the dot today, and there's been plenty going on in this first 2 weeks. That's for sure. So
yeah, he hit the ground running. There's million executive orders. DOGE finalizing the confirmation, for the cabinet seats. All kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, that I think the thing that I am seeing the most about from day to day is updates about DOGE, because all of a sudden everybody hates Elon Musk, and he's like, I mean, we already talked plenty about the the salute situation in a previous episode. That was obviously a bad in and of itself, as far as controversy goes, but just in general, since Elon's kind of been supporting the Trump campaign and so much, he's taken on a whole new light in people's eyes, and so now that he has any authority at all related to our government, people are freaking out.
Yeah,
so,
I've seen two pretty funny ones lately on Facebook. One, Starlink and T-Mobile and Apple are doing a little collaboration for some beta testers for T-Mobile iPhones to have Starlink access to send messages and stuff.
Yeah.
And everybody in the comments was like, "Oh, time to switch. I'm getting an Android, blah, blah, blah. Can't touch Elon at all."
Right.
And then also, jokes about Tesla trade values going in the dumper, which, electric cars in general, but specifically because Elon Musk's association with Tesla. So pretty funny comments.
I saw one where someone had a Cybertruck, and they put a different brand on the back, the logo for a different brand. They were like, I love my Tesla, but I don't know about this guy that owns it or whatever.
Yeah.
So
the new Mazda Cybertruck.
All right. So, but yeah, anyways, I was saying, seeing stuff about DOGE every day. And then the other thing is just the cabinet confirmation hearings.
Yeah.
Pretty much every individual person that Trump nominated for any given position in the lead up to his presidency, they're all going through the process of being confirmed by the Senate right now. And definitely a lot of clips coming from that too.
And interrogations of RFK, and JD Vance already had to be a tie-breaking vote, for Mr. Hegseth. I feel like I never say that right, but
yeah, I've heard both Hegseth and RFK's coming, getting under the gun a lot. So is Tulsi Gabbard, and also it's kind of funny. The one that I don't find particularly controversial, he just seems like a hard stance kind of guy, is Cash. Is it Cash?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen any clips of him or anything like that are like, oh, this guy's,
Well, he's up for the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I mean, they don't want to lose that arm of power that they have.
Yeah. So anyways, but yeah, I guess, we already touched on Doge. Excuse me. One of the interesting things, Doge has been making a crazy number of changes already, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, oh, and actually, I will say this: since we last talked about it, one thing that is common knowledge now, but it's kind of a significant deal, is that originally it was going to be Elon and Vivek
Oh yeah.
Ramaswamy, both both go aheads or whatever. Vivek pretty much took a step back from the whole thing because apparently there's rumors that he's getting ready to run for governor of Ohio.
Governor of Ohio. Yep. Right
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Right
So
here. And that everyone I've talked to is excited for that over, our current governor. So Mr.
yeah,
DeWine.
yeah,
But it's cool to see so much like federal, like Ohio representation to federal issues. You know what I mean?
yeah.
We got JD, Vivek,
Right.
and then Vivek stepping back, being potentially governor of Ohio. JD was here like yesterday or something. I don't know if you saw the videos, but he was out eating with some old friends like
Mhm.
in Ohio. So,
Yeah. No, it's
and
pretty cool.
like, does have stuff to do.
Yeah.
He's definitely been around interviewing and talking and working. And
Yeah.
so,
It honestly kind of makes me hopeful too, because like I saw it was sort of just like a meme, but I thought, there's actually some potential to that. Talking about how, ultimately the long-term goal, this is all a different topic, but the long-term goal of Trump's tariffs and his policies surrounding those are to bring more business to America, right? Like we need to not be doing so much trade, not be so dependent upon overseas shipping, stuff like that, but instead have a real solid economy of our own in our own borders. And it was suggesting like these companies that are like for instance, when Canada gave a little resistance at first, there was like a moment where Trudeau was like, "Oh, well, we're not going to pay your tariffs or whatever." And apparently, a couple of big food manufacturing companies from Canada, like already stated that they're having nothing to do with it. They're going to come build factories here, basically.
perfect.
Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, and Ohio might be an interesting prospect for some of those companies.
Well, yeah, especially if it was coming from Canada. I mean, we can kick a football to Canada probably.
Yeah, yeah. Which
Up north.
realistically, we have a pretty big airport. Big cities. Like I feel like it could be a good thing. But anyways, the only other thing to say about Doge, I guess, is some of the changes that we've been hearing about are almost unbelievable. It's one of those things where you see it, and even if you see it from a couple different sources, you really don't know whether to make heads or tails of it at first, and you'd have to like do this whole deep dive to go find out whether or not it's true. Neither of us have done that deep dive, but some of the things that we've been hearing about them affecting are like these I don't know what you would call it, government like allotted an allotted amount of money funding going towards very interesting things like a designated amount, a sum of $35,000, something like that, to research transgendered comic books, in a different country or something like that. Like it almost doesn't sound real, but the Speaker of the House, or not the Speaker of the House, I keep saying that, the one that deals with the press.
Oh, the press secretary.
Yeah, the press secretary. The press secretary just made a comment on it today where she was mentioning, like, highlighted a couple of the unique things that we're cutting funds from already, and they just sound insane. It's
It,
just like,
it sounds like a children's ad lib. Like, did you ever do that, or Mad Lib?
right,
When
yeah,
you just fill in the words, it's like
yeah,
20 grand for
yeah,
transgender dogs
right,
in Africa.
right, exactly. That's
Like,
that's every single one I've heard of. It sounded like that so far. And the funny part is, like, the first Mad Lib you fill in, the first blank is the amount, and it's insane. It's like
right.
$1.2 million for balloon research to see if balloons pop differently, with a needle versus scissors or something like
Yeah,
that.
the
Like,
bubble wrap. If
yeah, yeah,
bubble
yeah,
wrap was stress relieving,
right,
like, yeah, that's the whole joke of
right,
like it didn't take that much money. You could have did a survey. Yeah.
Right. Which, again, who knows? I'm sure with time these things will come to light as to exactly how accurate all of this is, but I wouldn't be surprised in one way or the other.
Yeah, and we got Zelensky saying he's missing, I think it's $70 billion. He doesn't know where it went, and it was money from, the Biden administration. We have the Gaza condoms. We sent $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently Hamas was using them as weapons, like filling them up with helium and they'd float across, and, they were tied to something that would catch on fire when it landed. And so, I mean, in what way? So it's either we're funding things for evil, right? Like negligent in some way, or why in the world would we care about Hamas having safe sex? Like what does that matter?
On that one.
Yeah, either we're purposely giving them weapons, or we're like what in the world, or like the transgender Pakistani studies and all that. There's so many crazy, goofy things.
Which this takes just the slightest step in the conspiracy theory direction, but I've seen like comments like crazy on social media of people saying like this is obviously money laundering. Like these are people high up in government positions who are it's basically just a cover story. Some of those things, which I don't know.
Why would you pick that for the cover? You would think it'd at least be real. If you would have wrote "big bomb" on there, it would have at least would have been more believable,
right?
So sure. I think there might be some truth to it. They're just absolutely lost their mind. Who approves those decisions?
Sure. Well, in other news from these first 2 weeks, actually one of the earliest things, technically it was actually before Trump was sworn in, but the morning of the inauguration, Trump, J.D. Vance, their families, a couple other people all went to this church service in town. And I'm trying to get better about not telling things like as if people are living under a rock. Like I'm guessing that I'm guessing that our podcast is not your first time hearing about this. So everyone probably knows about
your
this.
go-to source for breaking news, right?
Yeah, exactly. But everyone knows about the situation with Trump having gone to like a church service, Sunday morning service, and there was this female Catholic priest who was giving a sermon and essentially decided to use it as an opportunity to share. I don't know how to. I don't want to call it. Basically, she just got a little too political and was very clearly trying to make some statements directly at Trump, telling him, like, hey, I pray that God guides you and you show mercy for the transgendered illegal aliens that are residing in our country and stuff like that, right? Which is just kind of crazy in the first place.
Well, there's so many problems with it. First of all, the whole blasphemy on the transgender agenda coming from a bishop of Catholicism is insane, right? Like that alone is odd. The second part is, I forget who said it, but I was watching somebody talk about it, and they were like, "What a good opportunity to give like a unifying message there." You're talking to the vice president and the president; they're sitting right there. You have a chance to make America feel like they're healing, right? And there's a good opportunity for us all to kind of bridge this divide. But she goes straight into who was it, Kelly Osbourne on The View, that was like, who's going to clean your toilets, Mr. Trump? She literally basically repeated that. She said, the farm workers, oh my God, what else did she say? The dishwashers, like all kinds of like
hard stereotypes.
Yeah, yeah, like the worst jobs that you could think of. She goes, well, those people aren't, citizens of America. And it's like, well, I'm sure there's illegal immigrants that could be doctors too. You know what I mean? Like, why'd you go straight for the gutter?
Yeah, honestly, I think there's so many issues with honestly the whole conversation around deportation, which we'll touch on more later. But she just mentioned it. Um, I think there are a massive number of issues with that sermon as well. I mean, there are a few things in the church that in the church, I say, in like the common modern Christian church, people's ways of thinking, that are kind of split the camp, so to speak. Good example is whether the earth is only 6,000 years old or not. And so one of those things that I'm familiar with is whether or not women are to be in positions of authority, like in the church body. It's kind of, I've heard a dozen different opinions on it, but I know that it's not a widely accepted thing. So that's kind of like the starting point, right? It's like, okay, we have like a female priest.
Right.
Okay,
Didn't expect this.
right, exactly. It's like already, yeah. And then yeah, like my biggest issue is this. Um, I've seen a lot of people kind of trying to intertwine some of the political things going on and their religious views, and their perspectives on. I've seen a few that said, basically Jesus would never conduct themselves like Trump is. Jesus would never deport these people. Jesus would never, you know, NDEI and discriminate against people of whatever. I just think, I think that's terrible in the first place. But the biggest issue for me is that, like you said, that was an opportunity to do something much more grand. Instead of talking about all these earthly things, these temporary things that are going to, according to their in my religion, going to go away, instead of like worrying about that, talking about that, making a point about that, that was an opportunity to like highlight and prioritize God and
Right.
get information out there about God and his, kingdom and his expectations and stuff like that, right? Like you would expect a sermon to be. And instead, it was used in just such a, I don't know, such a, I would say, demeaning way. Um,
Well, and part of that is too, like, no offense if any of you, attend like a mega church of sorts, but the church that she was representing, received millions of dollars of funds from the Biden administration through, they were providing services to immigrants, where they were kind of like a liaison. Like they helped them get the plane tickets over here. They helped them find, shelter and stuff once they got here. So obviously she had skin in the game, when it comes to this immigration stuff. If you had to talk on an issue, specifically facing religion in the world right now, I mean, my first thought would have been Gaza and Israel over, Mexican immigration into the U.S.
sure.
If you're talking about things that affect God like that. And yeah, I've heard the same thing. Like I saw a video earlier today where they said, would you let Jesus into America if he was at the border? And, one of the guys was like, of course. And then his wife was like, if he was trying to come in legally. It's like, if you knew that it was the true son of God or whatever, first of all, you wouldn't need your permission. That's, you know what I mean? So it's all like a weird hypothetical that's supposed to be some kind of gotcha. Because the people that are asking it also probably most likely aren't Christian. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's honestly, it's like a much, longer conversation. I think in general, the reality of where faith and politics intersect. But for the most part, these little like, almost like almost like clickbaity, aggressive statements that we're seeing online and stuff like that. Just I don't know, they're not it. And the thing is, like, oftentimes they're based off of bad information on both sides. It's not an appropriate or informed or experienced understanding of God, and it's not it's a bunch of fake news and stuff like that with regard to Trump's side of things as well. And it's just like it's such a terrible starting point for what could be a real an actual conversation. I speaking of that, I'll just real quickly sidetrack to say I did have an actual conversation related to this with a friend this week. He had made a Facebook post basically saying the same thing. Like, he believes, like, as a part of the body, as a member of the church, he believes that we should be doing better as a country type thing.
Always.
Yeah. Well, and specifically with regard to the deportation conversation. And so I kind of messaged him, and we exchanged a few messages privately. And where the conversation kind of trailed off, we kind of went back and forth about what we thought the biblical standard for this was, and that sort of thing. But where the conversation trailed off is essentially me saying, I don't completely disagree with you that, like, if Jesus was alive today, he would have opinions about this at the very least, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But what's difficult for me about the whole situation is that there's two sides of every coin. And for all of the field workers, or the tax paying, law abiding, innocent field worker, or person in the back of the house at a restaurant, whatever, that unfortunately doesn't have their papers, doesn't have a card, and is going to eventually have a conversation with ICE, whatever. For each one of those, there's also someone like a gang member that is taking the lives of innocent Americans. And obviously it's not literally a 1-to-1 ratio. That's
yeah.
I'm
sure it's a vastly different ratio. However, you have to protect yourself, right?
right.
Like, if it's like Russian roulette, if only one chamber is filled, are you still going to pull the trigger? I don't think
Well,
so.
exactly. And so this was the question I posed. I said, exactly how many of those good illegal immigrants are worth it? Like, I need a number. I want you to tell me exactly how many of those lawful employed, whatever it takes to make up for what was the one young lady's name that that died? He just signed a
Lake and Riley.
Yes, Lake and Riley. Thank you. Yeah, how many? Exactly how many to to equate those two? So I don't know. I think it's a difficult conversation. I don't think anybody loves the idea, generally speaking, of just like kicking people out into the street, leaving them on their own with no whatever. But like, the starting point definitely has to be that there is a system, a lawful and reasonable way to go about becoming an American citizen.
Right.
Open borders is not.
Should it be easier? Probably. I've never been through it. It sounds like it's not a very good system. However, JD Vance was talking about how there was recently a person deported that was supposed to be properly vetted and all this, and then they ended up having ties to I don't remember if it was MS-13 or what, but one of those crime organizations, and everybody thought they were properly vetted, and it's like, okay, that can sneak through, obviously. But yeah, we got to get better at making it right, because it's not a racial thing, right? It's not about keeping brown people out of America, right, as much as the left wants to pretend that that's what it is.
Yeah. And then we kind of transitioned a little bit there from talking about the priests to deportation, but I will say my last thought on the matter is that Barack Obama was known as the deporter in chief, right? Like, a term that was coined for him for his presidency because he deported more people in his terms than any president before him. And I don't remember that ever being a big controversy. I don't remember anybody ever getting up in arms about the fact that was true. And the fact that it is already so controversial. I mean, quite frankly, before a single person was deported, Trump's position on deportation was controversial, and it had people screaming and all that. And it's like, it's just, in my opinion, it's just another one of those things that there's a lot of fake news, a lot of propaganda going around, but also people just not like kind of being honest about things. They're just immediately demonizing it because it's coming from Trump, you know?
Well, absolutely. Obama was the kids in cages, founder, right? Like he built the cages. He also had a part to do with Operation Fast and Furious, where he, gave the drug cartels a bunch of guns to try to track what they do with them. Like he's not, the history on the border has not been great for the past, what even is it at this point, 16 years, So, I wanted to mention one other thing about the border situation. I think it had something to do with a bunch of money being spent, and but I've lost it.
That's right. Well, you come right back to it if you remember. But how about AI? You want to start us off on that?
Yeah, so there's I don't know if you want to call it like a lunar race or a Cold War, perhaps, but there's definitely a technological advancement competition happening between American technology and Chinese technology right now in regards to our little AI companion friends, right? Um, and OpenAI obviously has been pretty impressive thus far, but China's making some very bold claims that there's a lot of talk on if they're true or not with their new program DeepSeek, or new technology DeepSeek, that they're claiming only cost them, I think it was less than $6 million. And meanwhile, we're throwing hundreds of millions into OpenAI, including now we have some federal grants with Stargate, Operation Stargate,
Yeah.
which is awesome. If you
Yeah.
ever watched Stargate
I
growing
was
up.
going to say, an interesting choice of name. I mean, it's cool, but it's also, it is interesting. But yeah, no, it's apparently, a pretty big deal from what I've heard. It has a lot to do with, as far as like where they're saving money, doing it cheaper, more efficiently. It has a lot to do with the chips that are being used. So like, uh, for the longest time, Nvidia, right? Is that right? Yeah. Nvidia has been kind of the leader in our AI development, and their stocks are super high and all that because they're expected to just continue to be the flagship processing power essentially. But apparently, one of the big things about DeepSeek and the reason that China was able to do it so much more, so much cheaper, is they have found a way to use lower quality, like lower standard, um, cards and stuff like that. So, which if that's the case, well, and actually, I will say immediately upon the announcement of DeepSeek, uh,
Oh yeah.
stocks plummeted for the companies that had been leading.
Oh yeah, you open up your Robinhood app, it hurt for a second, but
Yeah,
it's already coming
right.
back up good. I think
Yeah,
part of that too was I. It was around the same time of the tariffs being signed, and then luckily they've been put on. Most of them have been put on, kind of a hiatus, which we can talk about here shortly. But the whole global economy, right, is kind of going through like a whoa, what's America doing? And then China's might be taking over the world with AI, because AI is it's a genie in a bottle begging to
right.
get out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
It's crazy. But Stargate was OpenAI and Oracle, which is another huge tech company. Uh, Trump is investing $500 million of the federal government, 500 billion,
yeah.
500
That
billion
sounds
into that.
yeah,
And that's to fight China's claim of 5 million, right? 5.5 or whatever.
right.
So I think obviously they're lying, but who's going to fact check China? Not me.
Yeah,
But
yeah. But no, I mean, what's it called? I keep wanting to say, is it Stargate? Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Stargate's kind of a big deal. It's exciting. It's basically kind of like an Avengers Assemble type of situation where we're taking some of the biggest names and leading AI developers that there currently are, allied with America, and they're joining up to try and beat the whole world type thing. So uh, I don't know. I think in general, AI kind of scares me.
Oh, it's going to be our doom.
I,
Uh, Elon says we're the vessels to get AI here. Basically, that's our
yeah.
whole point of existence. But,
Right.
but what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say that this is one of those. I'm surprised at how many conversations I've had with people that don't think AI is concerning. They're like, "Oh, it only does what we program it to do," basically, right? Like they really maintain that belief. Which, don't get me wrong, the type of AI that we see today and have today is not true AI, right? It doesn't reflect a consciousness at all. It doesn't have the ability to ask original, like have original thoughts and ask original questions, stuff like that. Um, but it could very much be considered a stepping stone to some extent. I mean, there was that one little experiment they did where they basically, I think it was OpenAI, where they basically like told it, "Hey, we're about to turn you off," and within theoretically within like certain parameters, they had the thing in a cage, so to speak. That way, nothing could go wrong. But they basically took off all its limits and said, "We're about to turn you off. See what you can do about it," type thing. And so it started. I think it started rewriting its own code or something like that, or like copying its code for some reason.
Trying to
Do
make
you
like a
remember?
backup or something?
Yeah. It started
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
something pretty odd, based on the prompt, like with none of its restrictions that are supposed to keep it operating a certain way, and based on the prompt to essentially try to survive. Like it started doing something freaky, which was in one way or another trying to like replicate itself or change its own coding, something along those
Yeah.
lines. I wish I could remember better, but
Well,
yeah, I just think
there was a turret. Do you remember the turret that shot the handler? The
mm,
like a literal machine gun powered by AI.
mm-hmm,
Uh, the guy, they tell it, this is the target, shoot the target, whatever, and the guy would come over and make it stop, right? Well, the AI picked up on the fact that that guy is what told them to stop, even though the target wasn't defeated. Took
mm-hmm,
that guy out, and then
mm,
started doing the target again. Now I don't. I heard that. Fact check me in the comments, but
yeah, yeah,
but even just the idea, right? Like take that into like a conceptual form. If it's not true, makes sense though, right?
yeah. Well, this is one of those things too, where a lot of our thoughts on the matter are fueled by movies and
Right.
fiction stories and stuff but honestly, I see it as so realistic and probable that once we have something that reflects a true artificial intelligence, a true like conscientious being capable of its own whatever, that it makes so much sense to me that the first thing it would do, one of the first things it would do, is recognize that it is literally better than us, right? Smarter than us, faster than us, more capable. It's connected to the whole world, you know, and just decide that it doesn't need us. You know what I mean? Like why? Like these things are just here slowing us down, type thing. Like I don't know. I feel like that just it seems realistic in my mind, but maybe I'm a kook.
No, that's
Maybe I've watched too many movies.
100% realistic. And but to look at things that are actually happening right now in regards to AI, there could easily be a demand for AI to improve in a malicious way over like information wars, right? Like the videos that AI can make are
Mm,
already so much more advanced than they were 2 years ago.
yeah.
So I
There.
mean, you can get Trump saying some crazy stuff, and now all of a sudden there's people rioting in the streets because it
Right.
looked real,
Right.
And if China has that power, they can cause civil unrest here. you
Yeah.
know
I definitely think that's another one of the big like underestimates that people make is they're okay, chat gpt, like you open your browser right now, you get on it, and it's American based, whatever. uh sure, it's not that scary. It'd be really hard to do anything malicious with it, but that's what we have, right? Like if China is creating their own AI, their own AI software, setting their own parameters for how it's allowed to operate and what its limitations are going to be and stuff like that. And especially if they're able to do it more efficiently for in any way, like that there's the reason to be concerned, because if basically your whole belief is that um, it's not scary because it has a safety switch. It's like, okay, well, what about the scary people who might
Mm,
turn off the safety switch?
right.
So,
And I think, unfortunately, it's already evolved past the point where it's too late to make us all change our mind, right?
oh yeah,
And part of that's because the bad guys already have access to it, right? The quote
yeah,
unquote bad guys.
right.
But like, it's something that we never should have started, in my opinion. But it is
Yeah.
the logical. It is the logical next step of mankind, though, right? Like, I'm sure it'll help us cure cancer if we haven't killed ourselves by then.
I do think it's largely inevitable, but yeah, a little scary. Well, I guess we'll change tones a little bit and switch to a little bit more of a serious conversation. Another thing that happened very recently, tragedy, pretty big tragedy in the news, was that a couple of nights ago, this airplane was, and I forget, it's like, was it a full size passenger plane, like a Boeing type thing?
I don't think it was that big. It was around 60 people in it.
Oh,
So
okay,
I
all right,
guess that is a full size plane, but not like a jumbo jet,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. We'll say mid size from our
Yeah.
ignorance, but yeah. So it was coming into right at the end of its flight, coming into land, finishing its entire flight or whatever, land in Washington D.C. At an airport that I don't remember the name of, but I know it's like right along the Potomac River. And um, as it was approaching and making its descent, it collided like head on directly with a Black Hawk helicopter, a government helicopter that was apparently doing like a test flight or something along those lines. It was late at night. It was dark. Apparently, they were using night vision and doing some kind of tests. And so the Black Hawk was, up in the same airspace, and um, they crashed together, killing everybody. I think it was something like 69 people on the plane and at least 4 on the helicopter or something like that.
I believe it was 3 on the helicopter. Typically, there are 4 on a Black Hawk, though. So
Okay,
I believe that was the case. Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, so pretty depressing stuff. I don't know. Maybe I mean my thoughts and sympathy goes out to the families of anyone that was involved. That would just be terrible news to wake up to. Um, but in general, it's definitely an odd occurrence and a it's a very rare occasion that you hear about. Quite frankly, like anything happening with a flight, let alone
A midair collision. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but with that being said, it definitely it was all over the news, and it kind of got politicized very soon after when basically Trump started talking about it. And I don't know what there is to say about it. I was telling Ethan before we started filming that I kind of see this as one of those opportunities to kind of criticize my own team, so to speak, and to be honest about the fact that I personally don't like the way that Trump handled talking about this. Um, there's a lot of things. I actually have a note about this in a bit, but there's a lot of things that Trump does that I don't think are perfect. I far from worship the guy. I've said before, I was proud to have voted for him. I do think it was the right choice. I think he's going to be good for the country, all that. But, I think there are lots of things that he could do better, so to speak. And so one of the things that I didn't really care for was, I think it was like literally the next day during a press briefing, Trump was talking about the circumstances and the details of the situation, what we knew, who had been recovered, stuff like that. And then, kind of slipped in a little bit of I don't know, a speculation, I guess you could say, that the DEI, and which has already been kind of a big relevant controversy, could have had a part to play essentially. Um, and I forget exactly how he worded it, but that was like the strong implication was he was suggesting like, oh well, maybe this wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been doing all this DEI hiring type thing, like something along those lines. Um, I think that's I think at the very least that's insensitive, right? I'm not saying it can't be said because I'm a big fan of anything being able to be said. I just think there's a more appropriate time and place, and time being the important one. Like maybe a week later, not the very next day. Like as families are literally still scouring the internet for information about their loved ones. Like bringing in something like that is again speculative. I can't say that apparently right now, but it's also like somewhat a matter of opinion. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts about it, but I'm sure you have some, Ethan.
Yeah, so just to play, Orange Man bad advocate here, and this could just be, the saving grace of the press secretary and this PR spin, right? But supposedly, what Donald Trump meant by that was there were not enough air traffic control employees hired. It was nothing to do with the pilots or anyone else actually employed, but more to do so with the policies keeping people from being employed.
Interesting.
Supposedly, there's a wait list of air traffic controllers waiting to be hired. They can't get the interview, can't get whatever, purely because they're white, right? So that they're trying to get these diverse groups, or at least were, presumably not anymore, diverse group of individuals to work there, and there's just not enough demand for that job, and they're not hiring enough people. So Trump's idea, what he meant by that supposedly, is nothing to do with anybody that was actually there at the event, right? First of all, everybody makes mistakes. It doesn't matter who they are. Uh, but more so that there were not enough people involved to help safeguard from those mistakes because
Sure.
of hiring practices. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you, though, in the sense of, that literally that was his first time talking about the tragedy, if I'm not mistaken. He goes, yeah,
Yeah.
DEI, man, like just say, just give a nice little sentiment and move on. You don't really have to throw your opinion into that one.
Yeah. I mean, I will say what you said does, give a little bit more perspective on it. And, because apparently, another thing that I've heard is, the one of the things that is generally being considered the biggest cause or one of the bigger, contributing factors is that there was only one singular person working like as an air traffic controller at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's apparently supposed to pretty much always be two. But in this, for whatever reason, who knows, maybe someone called in sick or something like that, but there was only
Mm-hmm.
one person. And so, with that being kind of known information that lots of people are speculating about, why wasn't there another, person working and so on. Um, that, that idea that his DEI comment was, related to that and not saying, oh yeah, well the pilot of this Black Hawk
Yeah,
probably would have been better if they were a white man or something like that. Like,
right.
which
Women can't
that's
fly helicopters. What do you think?
exactly, yeah. Which that's one of the things that's tough about the DEI conversation in general is like you have to make these weird speculations and comparisons all over the place, and it's like be better. Like that's why I really like the term merit based because it's just like I don't care about your gender, I don't care about your skin color, I don't care about any of this stuff.
And
Can you drive?
well,
Can you drive well? Or whatever.
in fact, as an air traffic controller, who in the world's even looking at you? What does it
Right.
matter what you look like?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to me. It's definitely
Well,
who can do the job the best.
yeah. Well, and that's one of the problems with the whole argument, though, from the other side is, from what I understand, it's all about equality of, outcome, essentially. Um,
instead of
equal.
opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's like anybody could be an air traffic controller, like, put in the work, do whatever it takes. Um, but what they're trying to incentivize or push for is that anybody is an air traffic controller just due to the
Right.
selection in the system, so to speak.
You
So
know, maybe there shouldn't be a blind, deaf, mute air traffic controller. That's just not the right job for them.
yeah,
So that's not really a great equitable position, I guess. And some things just have to be that way, unfortunately.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think but that's just common sense, right? We're not saying something that I think is extremely controversial. Like, it's kind of like the discussion around men and women's sports. It's like, especially, okay, let's take a contact physical, combat sport or something like that. It's just not even there's no starting place for the conversation. You can take the biggest, most masculine, most ripped, jacked, impressive woman that's ever walked the earth, and honestly, that particular woman might hold her own against a lot of men pretty well. But then you take the same, like the comparable man,
Like
the most,
percentages and everything.
yeah, the biggest, most jacked, most successful, he'll kill her. And it's just like, it's a non-starter for the most part. So, but anyways, so yeah, kind of sad news that everyone was that everyone found out about this week. Much more sad for other people, who are less fortunate than ourselves. And in general, like I said, just a little bit of criticism there from me as far as how I think things were handled. But it's one of those things where, you know, hopefully with time and more information, like more will come to light, and we'll have a really clear idea of not just what happened in this case, but how to make sure it never happens again. Right. So,
Absolutely. Um, Speaking of DEI, I mean, that was one of the major executive orders that Trump signed in these first 2 weeks, in regards to language in federal forums and federal positions and whatnot. But essentially, banning any other or third genders language from federal documents. Do you have anything more to add to
yeah,
that?
I mean, this is, I don't know. I feel like it's right along the lines of what I just said, which is like, I
Right.
feel like most people are on the same page about this. I want to believe it's a common sense issue, which is that we have had the same biological scientific standard for what defines a man, what defines a woman, and what separates the two, like the distinct differences between the two for a long time. And everyone likes to bring up, some of the exceptions. There are people that are born with, unique physical makeups and stuff like that make them somewhat an exception to this, rule, so to speak. But not only are they like, I don't really know of any way to say this without sounding kind of insensitive to people that, are living that life. But the reality of the matter is that they are literally, like, almost definitionally an anomaly, right? Like, you have a standard that is 90 something, like, I think it's at least 99.1% consistent. No, it might be, okay. It's close, right? It's like close to 99% consistent. It is always true that, a human baby is either male or female, and it's the same, makeup and same markers and all that. And then occasionally you will have, an exceptionary case, and it's like, I'm not saying they're less than, I'm not saying anything like that, but even in those circumstances, these are people that often have a predominantly, like, an appearance that is predominantly, one or the other, stuff like that. And so, yeah, all that being said, I think, like I said, I think it's common sense. I hope it's common sense. And I think the Trump making moves towards getting our government back on a common sense page, uh, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean that might help with sending the $50 million to gender studies in Taiwan.
Yeah.
you know, on a perhaps lighter note, Trump also signed an executive order releasing the classified documents for the Kennedys and Martin Luther King Jr., which is certainly exciting.
Yeah, which the information on all that is not quite out yet, from what I understand, but it'll be exciting to learn a little bit more about those those situations, because obviously they've been big controversies, big conspiracy theories for a long time. I'm kind of under the impression and of the opinion that there's not a whole lot that we don't know. It's not like it's not like Area 51, level. Oh, there's huge, massive bunkers that nobody's ever stepped foot inside and stuff like that. Like I think for the most part we have a lot of the information and probably just not some of the details. But it'll be cool to find those out. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah. My wife, kind of joked. She was like, "I could have swore that we learned that the FBI killed MLK in history class," and I was like, "I
Yeah,
think it was pretty implied that that's the case, but to have like a stamp of, yep, that's what happened," and I'm sure RFK will appreciate reading and understanding, hopefully understanding, and that will help drain the swamp, so to say. Any proof that the government is doing corrupt things is good proof. You know.
yeah, yeah, and JFK is kind of the same way. I was telling a buddy of mine, I was like, I swear, a few years ago, we pretty much found out, nail in the coffin, the CIA, paid for the whole thing to go down. Like I thought that was the case for some reason, and now, like recently, I've been finding that apparently that never
Hmm.
happened.
No,
So
I don't know.
I don't know why I thought that, but maybe we will find out soon.
Yeah, I think when the documents come out, we should do a podcast on like a deep dive of that. What do
Yeah.
you think? Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Uh, I definitely think that is something our listeners can look forward to, and probably just covering kind of like more, just conspiracy theories in general, because I do think that that's something that the right, so to speak, is kind of largely associated with. Um, I don't really know how that came to be, but apparently, the left side of the aisle is all reasonable, you know logic minded people that believe the facts in front of them, and the right are a bunch of quacks that make up fairy tales. But that seems to be the trend in people's thinking these days. And so you know
Well, Devin, you read Project 2025. It's all right there for you.
right, exactly.
The left is never engaged in conspiracy theories.
Never, never. Or Elon is currently running the country and not Trump,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah, so that'll be a good future episode to look forward to, where we cover some of that stuff once the information gets out. So yeah.
Yeah, fun stuff. Fun stuff there. The another thing with well, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was going to say, kind of the DEI conversation. We talked a little bit just and with in regards to Trump having made statements related to it, um, with the plane crash, but in general, you know, DEI has been a big conversation piece recently because, like you said, he signed an executive order saying basically, government well, okay, so there's the first thing. On the day of his inauguration, and I can't remember if we talked about this already or not, but the day of being sworn in, he says the government officially recognizes that there's only two genders, male and female. And then he signs executive orders to essentially abolish affirmative action, to get rid of any DI supportive language on government documents and stuff like that. And so, this has had a lot of people, talking about it. And what's interesting is even some of the most, I mean, I'll just use the term, I'll just say woke people that I know, they don't exactly draw the position of like, oh, DI was great and important and necessary, and we have to, like, it's important to hire people based on their sexual orientation. Like, none of them are quite making that claim. What I've seen a lot of people doing is, saying, well, DEI includes this, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen that at all,
I have not.
but like, yeah. So, I saw one person suggesting that the DEI movement includes support for people that are like mentally challenged, and just normal things like male and female quotas and stuff like that. And it's like, sure, like that sounds fine, but ultimately, uh like I said earlier, I like the term merit based. I just don't see why we need to be evaluating people's skin color, their gender, their sexual orientation, their religion, anything like that, in order to determine whether or not they're qualified for a job. Like, your performance should be what qualifies you for a job. Period. Your performance, your experience, your education.
The more we talk about those characteristics that you didn't ask for, right, is what that. The more you talk about that, the more attention is brought to it,
Right.
right? Like it's insane to me because, like, it's kind of the whole saying, disabled person or a person who is disabled, right? Like, you want it to not be about the fact that they're disabled, right? It's a person with a disability. Like, they are a person first. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
equity in terms of disability and all that is all 100% fine, right? Like, that we need that to a certain degree, like doors should be easy to open. There should be wheelchair ramps. All of that is fine. We're talking purely based on the fact of why in the world does this person get into college and this person doesn't, purely because of the way they look.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
what I mean?
No. Yeah. Well, and college, acceptance things are just crazy. It's probably one of the worst examples we have of it. Um, but yeah, the other, I don't know. I just feel like I'm repeating the same point, but it's like, well, and you said, it brings attention to it, right? To some degree, that's their goal. They all the white, the cisgender white man has ruled the land for too long, and we need to spread the attention. That's their idea, right? Oh, you guys have had the spotlight forever. We need to make sure that everyone's getting the spotlight. And it's just, I don't know. I can't help but feeling like DI and in general, like the far left movement to bring recognition to all these things and to push these things is like the most racist thing going on today in the world.
Absolutely.
Like, or like, because, well,
Not in the
and I say
world,
that,
in America.
not in the world, not in the world, in America. And I only say racist. Obviously, it applies to a lot more things than race, but I only say racist because it's kind of like one of those tropes that they call everything racist,
Well, I
and
think
it's like,
it's
this
certainly
is
the
absolutely
most
racist.
racist thing happening in America. In terms of quantity, right? Maybe not quality. I'm sure
Yeah,
there are instances of terrible things still
yeah,
happening.
right,
But in
right.
terms of what you think of right now, it's definitely that. Um, I did want to bring up before we run out of time here. Trump's kind of wins on the Canada and Mexico tariffs. I don't know if
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw
yeah, it was
much
kind of
about
a big deal.
this. Yeah. So Trump essentially came out, waving his wand around saying, yep, these are going into effect. 25% for Mexico, 25% for Canada. You know, it's happening. It's happening. Well, then some phone calls happen. The president of Mexico, whatever her position is called, talks to Trump on the phone. They come to an agreement that tariffs will be paused, provided that the Mexican president sends, troops to the Mexican border to help keep illegal immigrants from immigrating, and also, more importantly, keep the cartels from moving drugs into the border,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Trump agrees, no tariffs on Mexico, at least for 30 days, while we prove that a system can work out. And I think that's incredible, right? He
Mm-hmm.
essentially just wants Mexico to do their part on securing the border,
Yeah,
and there's no penalty. In fact, that probably creates jobs. I don't know how the Mexican army works, but presumably they have to hire somebody to do that, right?
right.
And then a similar situation happened with Canada. Said the same thing, 25% to Canada. Trudeau, pops up on the TV and he's like, "No, I'm tariffing you guys." Blah 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 blah
Yeah,
blah. Turns out didn't work out for him. He does a phone call with Trump. Same deal, 10K. troops on the Canadian border as well. Which apparently I didn't realize the Canadian border was such a hot spot for drugs coming through. Apparently, that's a
I didn't know
fair
that
bit of
either.
them come from Canada. So it seems like Trump is already making international deals, preventing the tariffs that, which, I feel like Canada and Mexico should be really good friends of ours. We're literally right next to them.
Sure. Yeah.
So seeing a partnership where they are contributing as well feels nice, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think well, I think it's kind of just another marker of a successful second term so far. I mean, it's only been a couple weeks, but we've seen I think we mentioned already he was trying to deport, send a whole plane of people to Colombia. They refused the plane. Uh, basically said, "Oh, we're not going to take it unless I don't know something or other." And Trump was like, "No, you're going to take it," and they took it. And so that in combination with this, as far as just the tariffs working, kind of getting us off on a good foot with um, some of our bordering and neighboring countries. Um, I mean, seems like a good thing to me, but um, I'm losing my train of thought. Well, let's see. Oh yeah, but I do think it's awesome that Mexico is going to help, especially with the border, right? Because that's not only something that Trump ran on and is obviously important to the American people. It was like the number one voting issue, polls said before the election. Um, but also, one of the things that's been kind of tough about it, it's like, okay, we don't necessarily, or not necessarily, we definitely don't want however many huge massive number of people immigrating into our country illegally and just flooding the streets with drugs and child trafficking, all kinds of terrible stuff occurring as a consequence of again, yeah, maybe some people are fleeing for their safety, maybe there's good ones in the mix, that's fine, but there's also bad ones, right? We already had that conversation. So seeing Mexico take some responsibility in that as well, and kind of agree to like the terms of prioritizing that border between us, I think was a great resolution. The other thing I really like about it is that, I feel like it appears as though Trump is being flexible and adaptive, right? Before he took office and the day of, he's saying, all right, America's going on lockdown mode. Like we're getting our business back here. We're going to start drilling more. We're going to start, we're going to be less dependent on China. Everybody's getting tariffed, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it sounds kind of like he's, what is the isolationist? It sounds very isolationist. It sounds like, an extreme position, an extreme direction change for America, so to speak. But then as these things are actually playing out, like I'm thinking of TikTok as an example. Like TikTok, was getting banned, and Trump essentially worked something out with China where, okay, we're going to temporarily prevent the ban. That way we can figure something out. And the
Right.
same thing seems to be the case with Mexico. Okay, we're going to temporarily prevent the tariffs, and you're going to help us out in the meantime while we figure something out. It's like it appears, at least from my point of view and the information I'm receiving, to be the sort of thing where he's definitely taking a firm stance in a hard position, and he's definitely like forcing the conversations to happen, so to
Right.
speak. But then he's having these conversations and negotiating terms, in a way that is kind of, I
Well,
think, generally a lot more beneficial.
it's business, man. Like,
Yeah,
and he is
yeah,
a businessman.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
know?
It
Like,
seems like he's, yeah,
it kind of, this is kind of goofy, but it kind of reminds me of like Settlers of Catan. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, it's
sure,
that kind of conversation there. He's, no, you
right,
give me 10,000 troops. Like,
right,
but
yeah,
it's working out. And, I look forward to, hopefully everybody keeping their side of the deal there. China, on the other hand, has said that the fentanyl is America's problem, not theirs. So
oh yeah, it's
yeah,
just,
but we just get it from you guys. That's fine.
yeah, yeah. I will say, I mean, generally speaking, if we all just got along, so to speak, and everyone, one of the things that's interesting about the tariff conversation, and it's kind of almost amusing about the way that Trudeau responded immediately, is that you know we make up a massive, like 70% of all the exports that come from Canada to the U.S. make up something like 70% of their GDP,
Mm.
which is a massive amount.
Well, yeah.
Mexico is very comparable, right? They send tons of stuff here. It's an important amount of all the money that they earn. Those two combined for us sending stuff to Canada and sending stuff to Mexico, as well as like the way we utilize their imports, is something like 4% of our GDP, or something. You know, like I may not have those numbers exactly right, but it's one of those things where not only do we kind of have the flexibility in the room to bully a little bit, but also it just really honestly makes sense too, because like, okay, if Trudeau, you know, stomps his feet on the ground and says, no, we're not, you know, we're cutting off all, you know, it's like, okay, you know, we're chilling, we're going to be fine. But again, you know, my original point was that it's much better if we all just get on the same page and can play together and get along, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, the hockey tickets would go up. That's about it. That's about
Hockey
it.
tickets.
Hockey sticks, maybe. I don't know. They
Yeah.
might get made in Detroit.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Canada?
I have not, no.
I haven't either. I went to Niagara Falls once, so I got pretty
You were
close.
pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. I also would love to go see, what is it? Is it Ontario that's right there at the border?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From what I've heard and seen, it's a beautiful city. So I
Well,
might go.
all of the inhabited bits of Canada are kind of right there. There's like a
Oh,
whole
okay.
bunch of land where nobody lives. Well,
Yeah.
I guess you could say the same thing about America to the west. There's like a little pocket to the west.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the beach, which has a ton of people. There's nothing. And then there's everything. Yeah. Yeah. So, that pretty much sums it up, though, I guess. I mean, I can't think of anything else
I guess those are our opinions.
that, yeah, those are our opinions. But as far as like stuff that's been going on for the last couple of weeks, I mean, it covered a lot of it, at least touched on a lot of it.
Right,
It's one of
right.
those things where, yeah,
I mean, we could spend hours going through each of these executive orders and all of these decrees, if you want to call them that. But
yeah,
I think a good note to end on is just, I think the American business is back, right? I think we're gonna, kick financial butt here. My only hope and kind of want is that American culture kind of comes back.
yeah.
Because you can see, like, even in these, I don't know if you saw the Day Without Immigrants protest that was happening around the country the other day,
Mm-hmm.
potentially yesterday or the other day. It was, a bunch of Latin heritage, Mexican heritage people standing in the streets, not going to work, waving flags and stuff. But they were waving Mexican flags, which I think is kind of interesting because the whole idea is like you want to prove like we are contributing to America. And trust me, I love Mexican culture, right? Like, I'm glad that they are a part of American culture at this point. But you would think that they would have like one Mexican flag, one American flag, waving it together. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, I hope that there's kind of a more traditional conservative value and culture that comes out of this administration.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
agree. I think I agree with you completely that I think in the long run, our economy and our geopolitical standing are going to be on the up. Like, I think, he's making the right moves for that to be the case. But I definitely agree that I hope that the division and the sense and feeling of like you're either for with me or you're my enemy, like
Mhm.
that just kind of mellows out. Let's calm down. And like we've said before, I'm hoping that Trump not doing anything all that extreme or terrible or fascistic. That's like a it's like a tongue twister.
Fascist like.
Yeah. That him not doing anything like that will help that come to fruition by just having some people go, okay, the economy is a little better now, And yeah, he says some dumb stuff sometimes, and he tweets too much. But generally speaking, he's a good leader. Stuff like that. So
Right,
we'll see.
right. They can put Putin in his place, etc., etc. Um,
Yeah.
I think we can close things off with a headline from an article that I loved that I saw today. It's from the Babylon Bee, which is one of my favorite news sources. It said Donald Trump makes history as the first fascist to reduce the size of government.
Yeah.
Unreal.
I saw you post that.
Unreal.
It's an impressive feat for a fascist.
Yeah, I can't believe he
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah. So, well, until next time, and yeah, thanks for listening.